Here in Lagos, Nigeria, we are going to turn our attention over to the big issue on ground now regarding the tax reform debate that has been on for a very long time. During the course of last year, we saw a bit of back and forth with the northern governors, the NGF, the presidency, Taiwo Oyedele coming out to always talk about some of the trending conversations surrounding this bill. So just last week, at last 36 state governors have agreed with the Presidential Tax Reform Committee on the modalities of sharing the value-added tax now, and also the 30% base derivation. Well, also the governors endorsed the sharing of the proceeds of the VAT on a 20 basis on the population. The communique of the governors' meeting with the members of the Presidential Tax Force Committee in Abuja and signed by the chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum, NGF, Abdul Raham Abdul Razak, said, and I quote, that the forum endorsed a revised value-added tax, VAT, sharing formula to ensure equitable distribution of resources. So the agreement they had was 50% based on equality, 30% based on derivation, and of course 20% based on population. Members also agreed that there should be no increase in the VAT rate or reduction in corporate income tax at this time to maintain economic stability. Now, joining me in the studio this morning to dissect everything you need to know really regarding the tax reform debate is Otumba Kenny Odugbemi. He is a public analyst and he joins us live this morning. Thank you so much for coming on board.
Thank you very much. It's always my pleasure to be with independent television, the best of the best. Thank you.
Absolutely, certainly the best indeed. So I'd love us to talk about the meaning of the tax reform bill because there seems to be a lot of controversies surrounding it, and I feel a lot of persons do not understand, and average Nigerian do not understand what this truly means.
Thank you very much. Tax bill, the literary meaning is that government is empowered. As long as you run any form of government, the citizens must pay tax, which means tax must follow certain pattern. But for you, since we are running a democratic governance, it should come in form of a bill that must be debated in the House to agree on it based on certain criteria. Basically, a country need money to run most of the activity that is there to function very well. And there are three sources through which they get money. One is through tax. There are two types of tax they collect. We have company income tax, the one you mentioned. We have personal income tax. Company income is regarded as corporate income tax. Then we have personal income tax. The personal income tax goes straight to the state. The company tax goes straight to the federal government. The other form of tax we have is called VAT. VAT is value added service, and value added service is driven by consumption pattern. It is based on service delivered, you charge consumption pattern. And we need to first understand that it is government, because the legislated over it is a bill, it must pass through law. A government rule, government comes to power through law. You understand? Create an enabling environment through law and also determine the rate. That is what's in tax bill. Interestingly, there were 4 bills that was sent forth to the House of Assembly. Interestingly, it's only the tax bill they pick on. The other one they allow you to go because that tax bill is only the bedrock of the whole. Without the tax bill, there can't be order. We have what we call tax administration. How would they when there's a change in the way when you change the parameter in form of the bill and you change the collection mode, it means now that you have to do some form of administration. What it means is that the government is now moving toward what we call central administration, which is different from the one. Now we are saying federal road FRSC is the only body that to collect revenue for everything we do. So they've centralized it, and if you've centralized, there's a need to do administration. Partnership, collection of tax. Government alone cannot just sit down and say they want to collect. They don't have enough staff to go and collect tax. So there's a need for government to have a partnership agreement with organization which is called service provider, which they will provision, which they will sign a contract with, service level agreement contract with, to be able to call, and which they will get some little commission, percentage for the service delivered. That's the partnership. Stakeholders engagement. Stakeholders comes in the front that we have a lot. We have different stakeholders. Stakeholders are like the people in SME, those who are eligible to pay, people who deliver services across all the sector. Those are the 4 bills that we're talking about. And the essence of the bill is that if the citizens do not pay tax, how do you want government to create an enable environment? How do you want government to build infrastructure?
So this is not the first time we're having conversation regarding tax. In fact, a lot of Nigerians will tell you we get to pay tax. So when you go out to buy food, you add the VAT, that's the VAT, and then you pay for it, directly or indirectly. But over time, a lot of controversies have actually come up resulting to this, bill, due to this bill, some of which are we going to pay more taxes, especially in the north? We saw the opera that happened at some point. So I would love you to talk about that and why we have, at some point or the other, and till now, we still have oppositions regarding this bill. Just yesterday in the news, ASU was coming out to talk about the fact that they are still not satisfied with some of the, criteria in the bill.
Thank you very much. You see, there's no way you can have a perfect bill. But the principle behind it and the policy behind this is what is important. Law is as good as law, but it is when people begin to conduct themselves in line with the provision of the law that you will say the law is applicable. That's why we're running democracy. Come to think of it, a lot of issues in Nigeria have turned political. And when you are exploring political sagacity, you become very, very unreasonable. You become very, very unreasonable and not be objective. That is what is happening. A lot of people have not taken time to study the provisions within the bill. It is true. The idea now is to what we call increase the tax net, to increase the tax base. And also, people don't know now that this tax bill they do is even a guarantee to save the poor of the poorest. It is meant to protect them. So the idea, because there's some provision in it where for instance, where people are complaining is VAT. Look, as of today, VAT is where they get money, and even is even provided in the law. So which means that VAT 7.5 is supposed to increase gradually till you get to 15%. It's within the provision. They are complaining. It's already established in the tax law. So I don't see a reason why they should complain. Company income tax is the one they intend to increase to about 30%. Why the northerners are complaining is that because many of them have not taken time to study this bill.
So basically what you're saying is low income earners would pay little or nothing.
They are protected. They are protected. In fact, if you look at it carefully, when we look at the values of it, the tax bill, if well implemented, will generate additional revenue of 500 billion naira. This, and it will give guarantee exemption within the tax safety net. Exemption of about 50, which means 50% of the people will not be paying tax. Then 2, the compliance level, even is still low. The compliance level here is less than 5%, even 2%. But now we're only targeting, let's even start with 20% and it will increase. We're talking about investment turnover of about $1 trillion. So if government do not have that, how would they facilitate create an enabling environment? I think it's pure ignorance. It is pure, it is sarcastic. It is because people have not taken time to study the integrity, and it's because people are poor. Nigerians are, that's why I believe when the former president said Nigerians are lazy. They are lazy not by virtue they don't have strength. They are lazy in their thinking faculty because they refuse to learn. They refuse to understand. They are very sarcastic. It's only what comes to them. You see, if you want a change and you don't want to change, how can you get a change? That's the problem we have.
Let's go back to the issue of compliance, because it always comes out on the front burner when we talk about taxation. How would you compel people to pay taxes? And now we are seeing a situation where low-income earners would pay little or nothing. So how would the government, generate revenue? That's another conversation now.
Thank you very much. That's why we have tax administration, the tax administration policy. That's why government has encouraged facilitated registration of businesses. Government has so which means which means government, the people themselves must be committed to what they do. They must file their tax return. And there are a lot of LRS is doing a lot of work, FRS is doing all over the world. You must file your return. But because our people, because Nigerian happen to Nigerian most of the time, Nigerians want to run business. Get you? How can people be running multi-billion-dollar businesses and it's only paying 500,000? Because they with the way they, but now the high level of transparency, because they've not digitized most of the operation. So you cannot hide. It's now they've improved the level of transparency. The administration is becoming seamless. You know, when you automate, you digitalize, it's easier to do. And also financial exchange is involved. Financial transaction is involved. Even if you want to claim that you don't want to pay, financial transaction exchange is there. I mean, the financial that will have the flow, because most of the money flows to the bank. Is that also? They were able to track it. So now it is open. Okay. It is time for us to comply. When we pay our tax, we can now be in a position to begin to ask government, what are you doing with? But people who don't pay, and the high and the mighty are the ones that are guilty. Especially people in the lower house and upper house, who owns most of the multinational company. They have shares there. It's because of self greed. That is what is happening. And they refuse to comply because of they still want to maintain status quo. But they want the change. They want their own change to move forward. They are not thinking of the change of the people. Why is it that the current expenditure of the administration they hit 100%, but the capital expenditure that's supposed to create an environment is 25%? How do you explain that?
Interesting. Well, just so many things to talk about regarding the tax reform bill. The debate has been on and it's still on, but it's a good thing that we're making progress. Anyway, we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll talk about the governor's stance on all of this. Well, many thanks for staying with us. If you're still, or if you're just joining now, you're on to This Morning on ITV right here in our Lagos studio. Our major attention is on the tax reform bill and everything you need to know regarding it. So just last week, Thursday, we saw that the 36 state governors has finally agreed with the Presidential Tax Reform Committee on the modalities of sharing the value-added tax and the 30% base derivation. I still have my guest with me in the studio. Now let's talk about the politics of all of this, because we saw what happened in Kaduna with the northern governors, how they said let's withdraw the bill, and now all of a sudden they are dancing to the tune of the president. What really truly happened, and with this new development on board, is it going to affect the north negatively?
Thank you very much. I'll repeat again. Most of the people in government, in position of authority, like governor, like House of Assembly, I describe them as accidental managers.
Why do you say that?
Because some of them just find themselves in that thing by virtue of the godfatherism they have. They lack what we call capacity and competence, even character in what they do. They want a change, but they don't want to change. Let's now come to it. Let's even know where we're coming from. How did we get to this point? Nigeria today, proud before now, successive administration has been very artificial. They are facilitated by what we call counterfactual actions. That is, just trial and error basis. How did you come to a point now that we only depend on oil? We do not do diversification. How do we come to a point now that we are now just printing money anyhow? The GDP as at the time, the previous government, is 450 billion. Per capita income is 2,000. We spend 96% of our revenue to service debt. The loan, most of the loan we've taken are higher double digits. The GDP growth is less than 2%. We printed new note. I told you the source of money, the government will have three sources of money. It's either they print, they take loan, or they charge tax. We were not charging the required tax. People are not paying tax. We were taking loan at high interest. And also we are printing money heavily. The money we printed is worth of 40 trillion. You will see now that we even have our oil was sold as a forward contract to get all this loan. That's why some airline could not even fly, because we've not been able to pay part of which we've done now. If you look at it, if there is no change in how we do things, people, that's why I say a lot of people lack understand. If there is no change, if there is no radical reform, we're saying Nigeria is going into the world of Venezuela. Let's now come back. So which they were used to, because this won't favor a lot of people, small set of people who have the opportunity, who have the godfatherism, who have the financial capacity, who are in a position to continue to enrich themselves. The so-called people that are complaining about it, almost the entire place is in a rush now because of Boko Haram, because of local hour, the second one, and they use almost all this money to go back again. Must we continue to do that? The question we're saying is this: they lack the understanding and the capacity, and because they are not sincere, it is they've been political about the issue. Right. Let us now come and analyze what we're talking. Prior before time, what does the new tax committee recommended?
Okay, just hold on. Before we even get to that part, I'd love us to begin to highlight some of the 5 points, that was actually agreed upon by the NGF. So the first one they agreed upon was agree on strong support for the comprehensive reform of Nigeria's archaic tax laws and agree on the importance of modernizing the tax system to enhance fiscal stability and align with global practices. Number 2, endorsement of a revised value-added tax VAT sharing formula to ensure equitable distribution of resources. Now, the new formula they came up with is based on equality, 50%, 30% based on derivation, and 20% based on population.
Thank you. All what you have just said, they are the provision within the tax administration and the provision within the partnership and the stakeholders engagement. They just summarize it up, because I've told you, for you to do, you have to digitize your system, you have to automate it, and you have to reflect compliance with the global standard. But where they are not sincere is what we're talking about now. The insincerity we're talking about is one, what is the provision? What was the provision of the tax review committee? They said equity 20%, population 20%, derivation 60%. That what that one is saying that is that the derivation is about the consumption pattern. That the people who consume most of the product should have good return. How can Lagos be paying tax, paying VAT in 500 billion in that range, and by the time you are coming, you are giving them 48, 1/10 of what they contributed? Is that right? Now, let's even come and say what they were talking about VAT. The VAT provision is already in the tax law, that 7.5 to 15 is not just their sweeping. They gave a gap of it that it will grow gradually. I agree. The only one they are saying now that we should not increase. Yes, in the interim, let's maintain VAT 7.5. You understand? So that it will set off most of the SMEs on more. Then the personal income tax, the complaint income tax. Let's also maintain the status quo. Why I agree with them is that we have not been able to raise our production capacity. The purchasing power of the people who will buy in, you understand, or people who will consume is low. So I agree. But let us now come to think of what they've said. They are now recommending equity of 50%, population 20%, derivation of 30%. Let me tell you the insincerity. The insincerity in this is that when you now aggregate the sum, you now want to share 50% equity. Why? A place that said they should not drink alcohol now want to come and share with people they consume high alcohol. What is fairness in that one? A place where most of all these businesses, they also consume their own brukutu. They consume a lot of things, but those ones are informal. We have not had any provision for informal. So if you look at it now, they are all mainly, most of the government that are complaining, the 19 states are only complaining of the money that comes. We should need to ask questions. All the money that have been going to them, how have they empowered their people? How have they provided infrastructure? Are they not in rush?
Now, still on this equity and equality, should it even be based on equality? Shouldn't it be based on equity?
No, the issue, what they say is normally it's called equity.
Right.
It's equity. That is, the 50%, if you, let's say you make 100 naira, you collected 100 naira as tax. 50% of it, you do 50, and you divide it by the number of states. That's what they're talking about. That is what the interpretation of that one.
So if 50% is for equality, how will the governors thrive for productivity? Since whether you generate more tax or not, you get money.
Let me tell you, they are getting cheap money. Most of the states in the north will be getting cheap money. They are getting money they did not work for. I would have preferred if they say derivation 60 or they now make it like 40 or 50, where the people who are consuming have some rebate to be able to increase the productive capacity. The question is, they want to get money they don't work for. When you get 50% of what you don't contribute, how is that fair? Is that fair? Look, most of them in the north, they say they don't drink alcohol. The consumption is in the south, and they charge VAT. And at the end of the day, you now want to get 50% of this VAT, and you also consume your own that is not properly profiled. What is the fairness in it? So
Okay.
which means the people are only interested in what comes in. We should begin to ask them, even what has been coming in, that you are demanding for an increase of the equity. What have you done with it? The citizenry have not asked the right question. That's why we continue to suffer. You see, I agree with the fact that, yeah, the derivation is very political. The tax committee only saddled with the opportunity of creating a framework, but the decision-making process is political, and the political is based on political innuendos and nuisance.
Okay, so there are those who would say that states like Lagos State, Port Harcourt, Rivers, Abuja do get some undue favor, sort of. That's why they are where they are. And then it seems states like Lagos and Rivers is going to bear the whole brunt of all of this with this new sharing formula coming on board.
Thank you very much. It is an aberration and an apathy when people who are uninformed come to say now that they are in a vantage position. Up till date, Calabar used to be the federal capital of Nigeria. Calabar and Lagos share the same thing. Whatever has been provided in Lagos has also been provided in Calabar.
But we have more companies in Lagos.
Hold on.
Headquarters here.
Hold on. Because they manage the infrastructure well, that's why they came. Calabar has seaport. There's a road network. If they were able to manage their resources well, Calabar will still maintain the status. So when people begin to give cheap reason, it could have been what happened in Lagos. If Lagos didn't behave like people in Calabar, it would have been the same thing. The question now is this. If you come to a thing, every state in Nigeria is endowed with mineral resources, with human capacity. But people in the position of authority, they don't even think out of the box. As I said today, out of the 36 states we have, only 5 that are functional. Most of them only collect this, they only collect better allocation, that's what they live on. What infrastructure have they provided? What human capacity development have they provided? Is it the one that is giving motorcycle to people, giving sewing machine to people? Is that the empowerment? The question is if many people in position of government are not thinking out of the box. How many of them are enabling providing infrastructure, desired infrastructure? How many of them are attracting foreign investors? Tell me, how have they? Lagos is attracting foreign investors almost every time by virtue of the kind of offers and offering they can give. What is stopping other states from profiling their state and attracting investors? Nasarawa is attracting too now. At least there's a value addition process for the mineral resources. What happened to all other states? Niger State is now attracting because of their stranded formula. What happened to other states? It's because they're not thinking out of the box. All other states have the potential that Lagos has. They can attract foreign investor. But all of them still take loan. What are they doing with their loan? Come to think of it, the subsidy, the revenue accrual from subsidy they paid, they get all those 1.24 trillion was shared. Go to all these different states. Is there any difference?
Right. Okay.
How can you have a state that is having 350 personal assistants? 350 people. Some of them, local government, will have 350. They say they are empowering,
Okay.
giving people money.
Let's go back to other things that was actually highlighted during the course of last week amongst the governors. Now, the number 3 agreement they had was on no increase in the VAT rate, a reduction in corporate economy tax at this time to maintain economic stability, but advocacy for continued exemption of essential goods and agricultural produce from VAT to safeguard the welfare of citizens and promote agricultural productivity. Number 4, recommendation that there should be no terminal clause for TED Fund, NASINI, and NITE in the sharing of development levies in the bills. And finally, they also agreed that supports given to the continuation of the legislative process at the National Assembly that will accumulate in the eventual passage of the tax reform bills.
Those are necessary consideration we need to give, because in the bill, gradually there was a provision for gradual extinction of TED fund because of the provision they had. You know, all those ones they get their derivation from state, from federal allocation states, and there were a lot of duplication in the process. It is because of duplication. And people see government infrastructure as their own personal infrastructure. Most of all these services are duplicated. And you can see MDAs. How many MDAs are really delivering values? How many of them are delivering value? You see, the problem is we are more too political over issue. I agree with what they said. It's just political nuances, nuisance, and innuendos that is making people to criticize things. Now, if you now stand that they should exempt almost all these things, where would the government get money? And let's ask ourselves. Now, Labour that is talking, because of the increase in the because of the increase, which is 70,000, most of the worker don't fall between 1 and 2, because you understand they are going to pay a little tax. I agree, there can be some modification, there can be some realignment of clauses, but when you now ensure that you put a clause that will limit the source of revenue they are getting,
right,
they won't be able to progress.
So,
but for the principle behind it, I like it.
Okay, so as we tend to coast home because of the time, in the interest of the Nigerian people, what will be the bigger picture of all of this? Really, how would it benefit the common man on the streets if eventually it sees the light of the day?
Benefiting common man is hold your... You see, the emphasis we had is too much on the federal government. Emphasis has shifted to the state. Hold your governor accountable. Hold your local government accountable. Most of the sharing formula favor the state now. Until people position themselves to hold themselves accountable, how will we be able to monitor? And people must be patriotic enough to pay their tax as at when due. When you pay your tax as when due, it gives you a legal ground to be able to hold the people who are managing it accountable. As of today, you can't hold them accountable because you are not paying. As I said, how can somebody be having 300 personal assistants, 400 personal assistants, sharing excesses and not be able to do certain things? And you say you are running, you are giving empowerment. How can you develop, you go and see machine, you are giving a motorcycle, you are giving this, you understand? Every time you say you are empowering. Is that empowerment? It's not empowerment. It is when you create it is infrastructure that drives capital movement from one point. When there's exchange of goods and services, it creates a value chain. As of today, do we create value? As of today, our consumption capacity is hitting the roof. That the production capacity is almost netting the ground. Most of the people who are even talking, you are rejecting, are more dollarized than us. Because most of what they do is imported. We're too much import dependent.
Right. It's always an unending conversation right here on This Morning on ITV. Interestingly, this particular conversation is an ongoing one as the debate is still on. Hopefully, we'll see how things, turns out eventually. But I really must thank you. Otumba Kenny Odugbemi, a public analyst, for coming on board today.
Thank you very much. It's always my pleasure to be with you. Certainly, you are the best.
Of course, ITV the best indeed. Anyway, that's our bit this morning in Lagos, Nigeria.